Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Pokemon Legends Arceus. We quelled the Raging Arcanine, so it's time to do some stuff in our main hub world. Huzzah! As in side quests. So we got a few little things to do here and there, continue the story, and then we will get to the next area next time.
Expanding on my point from last part about the way people in isekai worlds don't ever dress in the way like they should for their time period. One of the more amusing anime stylistic tropes is how you know a character is important if they dress like they would in the future or in some wacky fantasy anime, but you know a character is utterly insignificant if they're dressed like this, like someone who would be wandering around a town would be.
I'm just reminded of that episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you see Yugi and Joey in the crowd of like all normal boys
normies,
with brown hair. And it's like, yeah.
It's even something that like a universe that has its own made up styles would do. Like Final Fantasy X, which sort of tricks you into thinking it's an isekai story for a little while until it pulls the rug out from under your feet at the 11th hour. It sort of has this element where everyone in the universe dresses in this really like they're in a tropical setting, so everyone's wearing shorts, bikini tops, that sort of thing. There's a lot of shirtless guys walking around. But you can still tell who's important and who's not, because all the NPCs that aren't like major supporting characters just have really relatively plain looking clothes within that style, whereas someone like Donna will have this full-on dominatrix look, and you're supposed to be a priest. Why are you dressed like that? Oh, but Unalesca exists, so who cares?
I mean,
yeah, I was gonna say, I think they're just basing everything off of Unalesca.
Yeah, I guess in a world
and working
where
downwards.
Seymour hair exists, you really can't complain about what anybody else is doing.
Okay, Seymour hair just looks like his weirdo interpretation of the Guado having head tentacles or something.
Or getting struck by lightning. One of those
That
two.
too. In fact, it was probably both. That would explain why he went crazy. But like maybe he went after the celestial weapon and failed. But okay. The thing about the Guado is that they all have like these really rigid sort of head tentacle things going on that are clearly not actually hair, but more like something like the Asari from Mass Effect would have. And Seymour just has a really weird, overlong version of it, which I always chalked up to him just being kind of a half-human sort of anomaly. But
I guess there is a gameplay reason for this, because when you're walking around town in an RPG, you want to have an easy shorthand to know who is important and who is not. Because this is something you'll often run into in old 8-bit and sometimes 16-bit RPGs where they're like, go talk to Jeff the priest in blah 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 town, and you won't know who the hell that's supposed to be because everybody has the same sprites.
Well, I mean, you say that, but I don't think there's ever a situation in Final Fantasy X where you actually talk to any of the important characters in town.
Well, I mean, I guess it can also be that you want your characters to have fun designs and you don't care about the nobodies, but, you know, that also makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer a game to actually pay attention to its NPCs, like, say, the Trails series does. Every fucking NPC in those games is unique. Or at least almost all of them. There are some low-impact areas where you might find some nobodies that you're not supposed to care about because you'll never see them again, but...
Yeah, I mean, we generally do see more in, like, older style RPGs where you have to go to like a new town every 20 minutes. You know, most of the standard townspeople just don't matter.
Yeah.
Versus I found that modern games tend to focus more on really fleshing out less areas.
Yeah.
Which allows there to be more unique characters in each.
It's a little like comparing modern Final Fantasy to old school Final Fantasy, where old school Final Fantasy would have you traversing an entire world map that's the entire globe of the planet you're on, with like a weirdly small handful of towns to visit across that vast space, and a whole lot of empty space that you traverse in about 5 minutes because your character transforms into a giant and just jogs across the planet whenever you leave town. It's weird. But nowadays you get stuff like Final Fantasy 15 and I presume Final Fantasy 16 that take place on like a single continent or maybe a chunk of continent. In fact, Final Fantasy 12 did the same thing. Where you're in a fairly localized chunk of the world. Final Fantasy 14 does this too.
Not as much anymore though, because now we're kind of going all over the place.
Each expansion adds another chunk to the world, but every story chunk takes place in one or two localized areas.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
I mean, you do have some older games that break this trend. Like one of my favorites is Ys 3, or the remake Oath of Felghana, which got announced for a Switch port 1 million years ago, and they still haven't released yet. Please do that. Thank you, Falcom. That game's all about like one town, and there's like 20 people who live in the town. But a game that came out in like 1995, it's really, really fleshed out and impressive. It might have been earlier than that, actually.
Well, I mean, like all of the Falcom games that I've played have adhere to that general philosophy where the game takes place in one localized area.
1989. Wow, damn, that's impressive.
Even Ys 1 and Ys 2 have that thing going on where in Ys 1 you're in this one local area, and then in Ys 2 you're in this other local area that's like above that local area. It's weird.
Oh, they did port it to Switch. They just haven't translated it to English. You already have an English translation, Falcom. What the hell is wrong with you?
Falcom's relationship with its publishers is inconsistent, so I'm not really surprised.
I'm just Ys Oath and Felghana is literally one of my top 5 action RPGs of all time, so I'm upset.
On that note, this is a PSA for all gamers. Falcom's games are awesome, and you should totally play them.
They're like a sixth of the budget of a Xenoblade game, but a soundtrack that's just as good. So
the soundtracks are usually amazing, but I'm just talking about the games in general.
Yeah, I know, but it's surprising that. Like, to bring it to Pokemon, like, Pokemon has half-assed its music production, I think, for a long time, in that they still are using synthesized music up till Scarlet Violet, and then you've got tiny companies like Falcom, who have a full orchestra and rock band for remakes of games from 1989,
Who the fuck is this hip pouch hippie?
Oh, I hate this guy.
This asshole, yeah.
This guy's
Look at that sneer.
Yeah, this guy's such a dick. He's like the really catty, oh, I don't trust you, so I'm gonna, even though his best friend is literally telling us to trust you, telling him to trust us.
Look at this pleb. The only fantasy fiction he's probably ever read is
Make no mistake, nerd. These folks might be closeted racists, but I'm open racist, and I'm not afraid to show it.
I bet this pleb has only ever watched Wizard of Oz as a movie, never even read the books. Yeah.
They're actually silver slippers. Thank you very much.
I bet you never even watched the movie adaptation of the second novel.
Oh, that's the really like trippy one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm surprised you've heard of it. I'm surprised.
I've never seen it, but I've seen it be referenced in a couple of like YouTube reviews and stuff.
Yeah, it's like one of the few times like an attempt was made to bring the weirder elements of the books to the screen, but
Yeah, unfortunately, I feel like Oz is something that I don't think I'll ever appreciate as the way the books have built them, because I'm so attached to the movie, and that's like the only way that I knew the franchise for most of my life. And even though it's quotation marks like inaccurate, that's still how I view the universe, if that makes sense.
A good way to cure that is to actually read the Gregory Maguire novels. I know you went on a rant while I wasn't here about
Didn't
Wicked.
Didn't he play a fucking Obi-Wan in the prequel movies?
No. No. Not Ewan Maguire. Gregory Maguire. Read the actual Wicked novels. They're good.
If I read the Wicked novels and I hate them as much as I hate the show,
You won't.
then I'll want a palate cleanser, which the Oz novels originals would be able to provide for me. That does make sense, Lewis.
That's true. Or you could actually like the novels because they're good.
Nah, I prefer being stubborn and not liking something I've never read in order to prove a point.
All I'm saying is that, they're better than the adaptations a lot better, as is often the case with novels.
Yeah, there's very few instances where I can think of where the book is worse. The only one off the top of my head is Starship Troopers.
Arguably, Who Framed Roger Rabbit as well.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit was a book?
Yes. Although I hesitate to say worse, just very different. And the author liked the movie adaptation so much, he actually wrote a couple sequels that took elements from the movie. So that's an interesting case.
I suppose that does make sense, considering that cartoons are such a visual medium. It would be very different reading about it versus
at the same time, like, the actual novel does some interesting visual stuff with its descriptions that I'd love to see adapted into a film someday. But to give you an idea without spoiling anything, the novels are much more noir.
So it's more based on the human character than the cartoons.
Not exactly. I mean more in tone and characterization. Like, characters who are good in the movie aren't so good in the...
Right. See, when I hear noir, like, well, there's more emphasis on noir. I'm thinking things are more grounded, and if you were to do that, you do that with the human characters, and not so much with cartoon characters.
Noirs aren't really. So it's funny. Noirs are grounded, I suppose, in comparison to like cartoons, but in terms of story structure, noirs are very melodramatic by nature. They're not super realistic in that way, in that it's all big emotions and big plot points and betrayals and stuff like that, versus, the real life private detective is just following the same guy for 3 weeks trying to catch a photo of him cheating on his wife.
Well, it's more of a dark detective story is what I'm trying to say. The tunes themselves are darker, the concept of the tunes is darker. It's less about wacky hijinks. But like all that really means, though, is that rather than arguing about which version of Who Framed Roger Rabbit is better, it just means we have two really interesting versions of Who Framed Roger Rabbit out there.
I find that that's generally a better way to go about book to film adaptations, because the change in medium means that things are going to be drastically different no matter what. And it's only like a once in a lifetime kind of thing where you're going to get a film to book conversion where everything feels spot on, like you're watching the original book as opposed to watching a movie based on it.
Yeah. Well, it also depends.
What about comics to film?
Comics is a little bit easier because comics are already a visual medium.
Yeah, I mean, half of the anime adaptations of manga out there just straight up lift frames from the manga.
Yeah, the manga might as well be a storyboard.
I that said, I would like just to try it to see some more experimental anime adaptations of some manga. Just to see, I'm sure that since we're trying something different and changing things, everybody would hate it. But
have you seen the anime adaptation of Count of Monte Cristo? That one's really trippy.
Oh, I have not, but I read Count of Monte Cristo a couple of months ago for the first time, and then I looked it up, and I'm like, whoa, that's interesting. And when I read about it, I'm only looking at it as in terms of comparing the original book to the new source material. I didn't like some of the changes, like kind of intrinsically, like God, I can't remember everybody's names because they're all French and everybody has 4 different names anyway. But the fucking Albert, Albert's fiance in the book doesn't give a shit about him. She just wants to do her own thing. And in the book, she's actually a lesbian and runs away from her father at the end. And that's her happy ending. But in the anime, from what I read, she's like, oh, Albert, I love you. And I just find that less interesting inherently.
That sounds like they changed it because they didn't want to buck Japanese social norms or some shit.
Yeah, I mean, Count of Monte Cristo is also like a 1,000-page book because Alexander Dumas, like Charles Dickens, was paid by the word. So he went on and on and on. If you've got a spare 3 months, though, I would recommend Count of Monte Cristo. It is very interesting.
I wish someone would pay me to write a book by the word. I could make so many millions of dollars off of just one book.
Dude, I would write the floweriest bullshit you've ever heard.
I don't even need to be flowery.
word.
I'm just like, you probably noticed this about me on Twitter, but I'm great at going on and on and on about nothing.
Like, he's a fantastic study of character, but the runoff sentences.
Dude, that's my big
yes,
problem
the poison made for
writing.
Cusco. Cusco's
I have
poison.
the worst habit of using the word actually twice in the same sentence.
Dude,
Oh, okay. You know what? I'm kind of feeling validated here. Not like twice in the same sentence, but just using the word actually. You know, Word really hates me using the
The
word
thing
actually.
is,
Yeah.
the thing is, when you're writing on the fly, you don't tend to use the word quite as often as you would verbally. But all the other filler words that you would use verbally, they pop up a lot in your writing, and you have to go back and erase them.
this is why when you're writing, you never read what you just wrote. You keep going. You like plow through so that you actually get words on the page. Because if you stop
Yes.
to edit as you go, you will never get anything done. That has been my big problem with writing for years, and I can't stop myself because I'm a nitpicky perfectionist when it comes to my own creative work, and that's part of why I never do it, because I look at my own shit and I'm like, this is terrible, and I never continue.
Quick, delete all the past 10 years of VSE parts.
Oh,
For
well,
the-
this
for
well,
the
you
first 10
see,
years of VSE parts.
here's the thing: you'd have to give a shit in order for me to get rid of it. So you know,
I will never show my first drafts to anyone, even as a bonus material kind of thing, because they're so embarrassing in how many filler words they have.
yeah, that's kind of where I am too. It's just like I'm gonna do my own edits before I show anybody else to get their edits.
The way I look at it, because like, I do reviews and all that sort of thing, I have to keep reminding myself, this will sound better in spoken word. It reads terribly, but it'll sound better when you're saying it. Trust yourself.
I also find it's easier to write nonfiction than fiction, though, because like if you're writing a game review, you can just stick to the points. Whereas if you're writing something creative and there's no structure, you're just
Is
doing whatever
this-
the hell you want.
Is this Looker?
No,
No.
this is the subway driver from Gen 5.
I thought this might be Looker.
Who got
because
isekai as well.
He has the frickin' hat, but
No.
It's just crazy though that people, like, I saw this guy and I'm like, oh, weird, and then people online are like, oh my god, it's the subway driver from Gen 5, and it's like, you remember the subway driver from Gen 5? And I'm like, okay, sure.